In 1999, we moved to Tennessee from Indiana. We built a new house down here, and we were still living in Indiana while the house was being built. When we chose the lot in this neighborhood, it was a brand new neighborhood. There were no existing houses on the street. In fact, the street wasn't even paved yet. But once we selected the lot, a lady in the realtor's office said to us, "Well, we have to tell you that there is a pet cemetery behind your property." And I thought, okay, that seems odd that you have to tell me that, but okay. I still worked then, and on the weekends, we would travel down and check on the progress on the house. So one day, my wife and I were down here visiting and checking on the house, and we decided to walk back behind the property and look for the pet cemetery. Well, it was pretty interesting. The weeds were well, they were weeds were up to our chest, and there was nothing back there. There was an old barn, a pond, and just a big field, and that's it. No homes. Well, we got back there and we walked a little ways behind the house, and we saw immediately that there was a cemetery back there, but it was not a pet cemetery. There were tombstones like 8 feet high or so, or maybe more. It's a small cemetery, a family cemetery, but it was definitely people, not pets. And some of the tombstones indicated that there were soldiers killed in battle during the Civil War. When we first moved here, I was still working and I worked from home. Sometimes I would be on call during the night, so I always kept a pen and a notepad on the bedside table in case I got a call during the night and had to write something down. One day I needed a pen and I went to get it on the bedside table and it wasn't there. I looked everywhere. I looked under the table, I looked under the bed. The pen just was not there. I was a bit annoyed and I thought, why would someone take my pen and not put it back? And then I thought, oh well, I'll just go to my office and get another one. So I walked across the hall to my office. And my office didn't look like this when I was working, but this is a simulation. I got the pen and headed back to the bedroom. And when I walked up to the bedside table, I froze and goosebumps shot up my arms. Right in front of the clock, out in the open, was the pen that had not been there seconds before. I couldn't believe it. Nothing like that had ever happened to me. I had never had something move like that on its own. So I went downstairs and I told my wife and my son what had happened. I said, there is a ghost in this house. And I told them about the pen. And they didn't seem too impressed. Many years later, I was telling our oldest granddaughter the story. And she said, I'm sure there's a logical explanation. And I said, yes, there is. It was a ghost. So after things started happening around the house, things that we knew were just not normal, it it kind of became like a running joke. Oh, the ghost did this, the ghost did that. And over the years, it just continued on and on. Over the years, after many, many things were happening, it, I realized that I couldn't remember them all. And so I needed to write them down. So I started a ghost journal and I make entries and the dates and pictures and things like that. But several years went by before I did that. So there are a lot of things that I have not been documented and have, I'm sure, forgotten. After we moved here, we had two beagles, a male and a female. So one day the female went out and I knew within a few minutes that the male would want to go out too. So I called him over to the door, to the back door, and I said, Alex, come on, go out. Well, he started over toward the door and he looked into the kitchen, which was behind us, and he froze mid step. And he had the strangest look on his face. Just, he was not blinking, he was wide eyed, just frozen. And I was calling him. And I said, Alex, come on, come on, come on. Well, he wouldn't budge. And I thought, what does he see? So I turned around and looked at the kitchen, but I didn't see anything. So finally, I stepped between him and the kitchen, and he blinked and continued on out the door like that was it. But he definitely saw something that scared him in the kitchen. In 2015, I was in Linda's study and I looked out the front window and I saw a man walking down the street. He was a young man, tall, thin, in dark clothes, had a long jacket on, and I didn't recognize him. And he wasn't carrying anything, he didn't look like a salesman. So I watched him as he walked down the street in front of our house. He passed behind the tree in our front yard. And he stopped and he didn't come out either side. He didn't go down the road or turn around and go back. So I stood there and I thought, well, why is he stopped behind our tree, in the road behind our tree? So I went to the front door, the window by the front door. I looked out, and from there I could see the section of the road that was blocked by the tree from the study. And there was no one in the street. I looked up and down the street. There was no one there. I turned around and walked into the family room, and there were chills up my arms. And I wasn't thinking, oh, I saw a ghost. The only thought in my head was, what just happened? I'm normally up very early in the middle of the night, actually. And on the eve of our 50th wedding anniversary, I got up, went downstairs. It was about 10 till 12, 10 till midnight. And we have 4 candles, battery operated candles, on the fireplace mantle. Well, when I went down there, all 4 of them were lit. And it was odd because I hadn't had the remote and I hadn't turned them on. I had misplaced the remote the week before, and I looked everywhere for it, couldn't find it. Well, after I saw that the candles were lit, I turned around and looked on the stand between the love seat and the chair, and there was the remote right out in the open. So when Linda came downstairs, I asked her, I said, did you turn these candles on? And she said no, she had not. Those candles were on by themselves, maybe celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary. Thanks, Spirit. Linda had 3 rubber bands on her office door, and these doorknobs are stationary. They don't go up and down, they don't turn. But for some reason, she put 3 rubber bands there. One day, Linda had just gone upstairs. After Linda went upstairs, I walked toward the front of the house, and I saw 3 rubber bands right in the middle of the hallway on the floor. And so when Linda came down, I said, did you put the rubber bands on the floor? And she said, well, no. And so I told her what I'd found, and she said, well, that's odd. A few days ago, she said she had noticed those rubber bands on her door handle of her study, and she thought to herself, well, I should probably take them off because we might accidentally knock them off. And then she thought, oh, well, that's just silly. There's no way we could accidentally knock them off. Well, maybe the ghost read her mind and decided to let her know that maybe she couldn't accidentally knock them off, but that ghost could knock them off. Over the years, we've had several instances of our clocks changing times on their own. Now, sometimes it's been the atomic clocks, which are radio controlled. They will change time when the time changes, but it's odd because they would not be near the time change times, and they would be way off, way off. The dates would be way off, hours off. Several times, our manual clocks that do not change time on their own have changed time. The clocks by our bedside, Linda found one day they were both off by an hour. And there was no explanation for it. And the clock on our stove has changed times. Like one day it was 3 hours ahead. And then a few days later, the wall clock, the atomic wall clock, was 3 hours ahead. In June of 2017, I had 2 Ring doorbell parts sitting on the entryway table. Linda and I were in the family room and we heard something fall, but I noticed those two Ring doorbell parts were laying flat when they had been sitting up on their sides. There were no open windows and there was no wind. This is the knife that Linda often uses. It's also a knife I do not use at all. So a few times when Linda has gone to get the knife, she's found it in that position with the blade up. In March of 2024, we had just gotten home from church and I walked over to the sink to get a drink of water. Well, I turned around and I noticed the laundry room light was on. So I thought, I don't need that on. Nobody was in there, so I turned it off. Turned back, I went back and got my drink of water, and when I turned around again, the laundry room light was on again. So I thought, well, that's odd. I didn't hear Linda come in there. So I walked over and looked, and she wasn't there. So I turned the light off. I went to Linda's study and I asked her, I said, were you just in the laundry room? And she said she hadn't been. So that light came on by itself. And then I turned it off and it came on again. We have an oil diffusing lamp under our desk. And one day I walked by and I noticed that the lamp was on and I had not turned it on and I had not been near the desk. So I turned it off and I asked Linda if she had turned it on and she had not. We have a motion sensing light on the front porch. One night we were having storms. There was even a tornado watch out. And we have some shrubs out front that move when it's windy and they cause the light to come on and off all night long. When I went to bed that night, I turned off the outside light so the light wouldn't be coming on. Well, when I came downstairs, when I got up, the light was off. I knew it would be, and I went to my chair and in the family room. And then I put my phone down and I turned around and went toward the kitchen to make some coffee. Well, I noticed out of the corner of my eye the front porch light was on, and I thought, how could that be? I turned it off. So I went and looked, and the light switch was on, and I know I had turned it off, and I had not turned it back on. In August of 2025, I put a pan of water on the stove to make some coffee. I turned the burner on, and the light on the stove indicated that it was on 10, which is high. And a few minutes later, I noticed that the burner was not red, and I felt that it wasn't even warm. It was cold. So I used a different burner. When Linda came down, I told her, I said, we need a new stove. This burner isn't working. She turned the burner on and the red light came on and the burner got hot immediately. That had never happened before and it hasn't happened since. In November of 2025, I was just drifting off to sleep and I heard a loud noise in our room. And within 5 seconds, I heard the exact same thing. So I turned over and Linda was partially sitting up in bed looking around the room. And I said, did you hear that? And she said, yeah, twice. I have seen many videos and stories about shadow people, shadow ghosts, shadow spirits, and it always just seems silly to me. There are shadows everywhere. What I just can't imagine why anyone would think there was a ghost that was a shadow, or a shadow that was a ghost. Until something happened to me not too long ago, actually, just a couple months ago, and it changed my mind. Did it scare me? What I saw really didn't scare me. We have never really been afraid of our ghost. It's a little mischievous, but not scary to us. We're pretty used to it. But take a look at what I saw. Fascinating. A couple of months ago, I was in bed and I was awake. I was getting ready to get up, and I looked at the wall behind me here, and I saw a shadow move across the wall, and it looked like a person walked between the night light by the door and the bed. So I thought, oh, Linda's up. So I turn over, and Linda was in bed, sound asleep, right beside me. And there was no one in the room. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So when I decided to do a recreation of what I saw, I thought, oh, maybe I can capture something. Maybe I can capture it to make it look a little bit like what I saw. But when I looked at the video, I was amazed at how much it looked like what I saw. It was like exactly what I saw. Fascinating. Have you ever had an experience that you just couldn't explain? Something very mysterious happening? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. The events in this video have occurred over a span of 25 years, more than 25 years. So who knows? In another 25 years, I may be doing another video. So ghosts and spirits, if you are still around here or wherever you may be, we wish you peace and love, and may God bless you all.